When we talk about timeless wisdom, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, it might not be the first thing that comes to mind. When you think about it, it's a military text, right?
Right.
But those excerpts that you shared with me, well, they got me thinking.
Yeah.
There's got to be more to this than meets the eye.
Right. Oh, you're definitely onto something.
Yeah.
The art of war has resonated across all these different cultures
Right.
and centuries. And it's not just, generals pouring over the pages. We see business leaders, athletes, even artists are drawing inspiration from this.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for someone like me, I'm more likely to be strategizing over a game of chess than actual warfare. So
Sure.
What's the value here for me?
It's about understanding these timeless principles of strategy planning and honestly human nature. And what's so fascinating is how those principles, they apply just as well to a boardroom negotiation
Oh, wow.
as they do to an actual battlefield.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this.
Okay.
Now, I have to admit, I haven't actually read The Art of War cover to cover.
Okay.
So where do we even start with this?
Well, it's actually surprisingly accessible
Oh.
for an ancient text. It's 13
Really?
concise chapters, each one tackling a different aspect of warfare.
13 chapters, that's practically a pamphlet compared to some of the books we've covered.
Exactly. Sun Tzu gets straight to the point, which I appreciate.
I like that.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
We don't even know for sure who Sun Tzu was.
Really?
His identity, it's a bit of a mystery.
Wow.
Scholars debate whether it was one person or a compilation of different military minds.
Oh, wow.
And even the book's exact age, it's still up for debate.
Wow.
Some say it dates back to the 5th century BC.
Wow. Talk about ancient wisdom. Okay, so let's talk about the actual content and the notes that you shared.
Yeah.
You mentioned these 5 constant factors that Sun Tzu says are key in war. It sounds a bit like something you'd see framed on the wall of a military academy.
You're picturing it.
I am.
But what if I told you these factors could be just as easily applied to, say, running a successful business or even navigating your own personal relationships?
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Yeah.
Break it down for me. What are these factors and how do they translate to my everyday life?
Okay, so let's start with the first one, moral law.
Okay.
Now, this isn't about, morality in the traditional sense, but rather the unity and the trust between a leader and their people.
Right.
Sun Tzu believed that when people are completely in accord with their leader, they'll follow them even into the jaws of defeat.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's about building that unshakable loyalty and commitment.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be essential in any type of leadership role, whether you're a CEO or a team captain or anything.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just demanding loyalty. It's about a leader earning that trust through their actions, their integrity, their ability to inspire.
Yeah.
Think about someone like Nelson Mandela. He was able to rally an entire nation because people believed in him.
It's true.
In his vision.
Wow.
That's the power of moral law.
That's a powerful example. And it makes you realize this ancient wisdom is anything but irrelevant, that's for sure.
That's incredible, right?
Yeah, it is. So what's the next factor on Sun Tzu's list?
This one might sound a bit out there.
Okay.
Heaven.
Heaven.
Yeah, but before you picture, lightning bolts and divine intervention, remember, this is Sun Tzu.
Okay.
He's all about practicality.
Okay.
Grounded in reality.
So what does heaven mean in this context then?
It's about understanding the environment, the external factors that are beyond your control, the weather, the time of day, the seasons.
Wow.
Sun Tzu argues that a skilled strategist doesn't just adapt to these factors, they leverage them to their advantage.
So it's about recognizing you're not operating in a vacuum, that there are always going to be these external forces at play.
Yes.
And the key is to work with them, not against them.
Exactly. Think about it like this. Imagine a marketing team, and they're launching a new product.
Okay.
Say, a line of swimwear.
Right.
Ignoring heaven would be like releasing that line in the dead of winter.
Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about timing, understanding the context, and knowing when to make your move.
It's like that old saying, a good surfer knows which wave to ride.
Exactly. It's funny you should say that about the surfing, because one of the most famous quotes from The Art of War is all about adapting to the environment, though Sun Tzu probably wasn't picturing a surfboard when he wrote it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're talking about breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting.
Yes, exactly.
I see that one quoted everywhere, but it always seemed a bit passive to me, you know?
Yeah, it's easy to misinterpret. But Sun Tzu, he's not advocating for pacifism or anything.
Right.
It's about choosing your battles strategically,
Okay.
knowing when to engage and when to kind of like hold back.
So it's less about avoiding conflict altogether.
Right.
And more about picking your moments.
Exactly.
Okay.
Imagine like a seasoned negotiator, right? They don't just go into every meeting looking for a fight.
Right.
They understand the art of leverage,
Right.
positioning themselves to achieve their goals without like resorting to brute force.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It's about using your resources wisely and aiming for like a win-win whenever possible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And this ties into another key theme in the art of war,
Okay.
adaptability.
Okay.
Sun Tzu, he emphasizes this need to be like water.
Okay.
You know, fluid, responsive, always adapting to the changing tides of the battlefield.
I do remember a passage in the excerpts about the importance of spies
Yes.
and intelligence gathering.
Oh, absolutely.
That one definitely like piqued my interest.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I might have been picturing like a spy thriller movie
Right.
instead of ancient military strategy.
It definitely has that element of intrigue.
It does.
Sun Tzu outlines all these different types of spies, including like the converted spy, which is essentially turning an enemy to your side.
Now, that's some next level persuasion.
Right.
But on a more practical level, what does that emphasis on intelligence gathering?
Yeah.
Tell us about, navigating the complexities of like business
Sure.
or even our personal lives.
It all boils down to this. Knowledge is power.
Hmm.
But it's not just, any knowledge. It's the right knowledge.
Right.
Sun Tzu stressed the importance of discernment, of being able to sift through the noise
Right.
and identify what information is actually valuable.
That's so relevant today, especially with this constant barrage of information we're always facing.
Overwhelming.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's not just about gathering information.
Right.
It's about filtering it and analyzing it effectively.
He even warned against, blindly trusting reports from the field.
Really?
Sun Tzu, he advocated for critical thinking, for cross-referencing information and analyzing it from multiple angles.
Wow.
Does that sound familiar?
It's like the ancient version of don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Precisely.
Wow.
And speaking of understanding your environment,
Yeah.
Sun Tzu, he takes it a step further with his discussion of terrain.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of ancient military topography,
Sure.
can you give me the layman's version of this?
Okay, so imagine for a moment,
Okay.
you're not just looking at a battlefield.
Okay.
You're looking at, say, a career change.
Okay.
Some fields, they might be considered accessible ground.
Okay.
Think of freelance work where the barriers to entry are relatively low,
Okay.
but then you have industries that are more like precipitous heights.
Right.
Think about becoming a heart surgeon, right? It's super competitive. It demands years of training.
So it's about understanding the opportunities
Yes.
and the challenges inherent in any given field, right?
Exactly.
Right.
It's about recognizing that just as a general needs to analyze the terrain before deploying troops,
Right.
we need to analyze the terrain of our own chosen paths in our careers,
Wow.
our relationships, our own personal growth journeys. It's all terrain.
And to bring this back to Sun Tzu's 6 types of terrain,
Yes.
you're saying each one represents a different kind of environment
Exactly.
with its own set of
Advantages
and disadvantages. Yeah.
and disadvantages.
Yes.
Yes.
So we have accessible ground,
Right.
which we touched on.
Right.
But he also talks about entangling ground.
Okay.
Think of industries with tons of red tape and bureaucracy.
Okay.
Then there's temporizing ground.
Okay.
These are situations where it's best to delay,
Right.
to wait for a more opportune moment.
This is fascinating. And I'm guessing the other 3 types are equally insightful. Absolutely. He talks about narrow passes.
Okay.
Think of specialized fields where expertise is paramount.
Okay.
Then there are precipitous heights,
Right.
which we kind of already talked about.
Okay.
And finally, there's positions at a great distance.
Right.
Situations where maintaining distance or
Recruiting.
a strategic withdrawal might be, the wisest course of action.
So it sounds like Sun Tzu really believed that understanding the nuances of your terrain
Absolutely.
could be the difference between
Success
and
failure
failure.
and failure.
Yeah.
100%.
Wow.
And it's not just about analyzing the external environment,
Right.
but also your own internal landscape. Sun Tzu, he placed great emphasis on self-awareness,
Okay.
on understanding your own strengths and weaknesses as a leader,
Okay.
as a strategist, as just a human being.
So before you even engage in any kind of like battle,
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand the terrain, both literally and metaphorically.
I like that, yeah.
And part of that is like understanding yourself just as much as you study
Yes.
your opponent or your chosen field.
You've got it. And this leads us to one of the most powerful and often overlooked aspects of Sun Tzu's work,
Okay.
his emphasis on the psychological dimensions of strategy.
Hmm. It's almost like he's saying that understanding the human element,
Yes.
as the psychology of like all the players involved is just as crucial as,
Oh, absolutely.
any physical advantage.
It's huge.
Right.
And this brings us to another fascinating part of the art of war.
Okay.
It's this focus on minimizing your losses,
Okay.
even in victory.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like winning at all costs.
Not at all.
Okay.
Sun Tzu, he understood that true victory is about achieving your objectives while preserving your resources, your people, and even your reputation.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a much more nuanced
It is.
and frankly like sustainable approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about how that applies to like our modern world.
Yeah.
We often celebrate those like ruthless wins, those crush the competition narrative.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And yet those kinds of victories, they can be so costly in the long run.
Yeah.
Think about like a company that achieves market dominance through, unethical practices or whatever.
Right.
They might win in the short term.
Right.
But what happens when their reputation is tarnished? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Sun Tzu would argue that a more, strategic approach, one that prioritizes integrity and long-term sustainability, ultimately leads to a more enduring victory.
It's like that saying, if you have to destroy yourself to win, it's not really a win.
Exactly, yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the art of war,
Yes.
I'm really struck by how relevant these like ancient principles still feel today.
It speaks to the power of just like timeless wisdom, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The core principles of strategy and planning and just like understanding human nature, they transcend any particular time period or battlefield.
Right.
And that's why the art of war continues to be studied by leaders in all walks of life,
Yeah.
CEOs, coaches,
Yeah.
even parents,
I can see that.
Yeah.
That's right. And we want to leave you, our listener, with this.
Yes.
What seemingly like unrelated area of your life could benefit from a dose of Sun Tzu's like strategic thinking. Whether you're, navigating a career change or a personal relationship, or even just trying to improve your own decision making, the principles within the art of war can offer like really valuable insights.
Absolutely.
So channel your inner strategist,
I like it.
choose your battles wisely, and remember,
Yeah.
knowledge, like strategy, is power.
Couldn't have said it better myself.